Hey everybody, this is Ray Ramos. Welcome to the Bold Lounge. I have a very exciting video to show you guys today. I think it will be very thought-provoking, impactful. So let's go to the video.
My timeline, and I said that it's important for me to share this with you guys. So I'm gonna play this video, and then I want to get y'all thoughts on it.
You know, I'm sitting here, man, in front of my job, heartbroken like a motherfucker. I raised my son, raising my boys to be stand-up men, to always do the right thing. Nobody's asking for perfection. As long as there's progress, then you're doing something right. So my son fuck up the other day, my 18-year-old, he'll be 19. He fuck up the other day, so I get on his ass. Tell him, you out here running the streets, man. You know what I mean? You ain't trying to do what you supposed to do far as school starting in August. You say you wanted to go to Central State. You got accepted. What moves are you making to make sure that you go to college? But you out till 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning doing shit you ain't got no business. So I'ma save you from yourself, son. So this your ultimatum. Grab one of these junior colleges that school start in August. Don't have to be Owens. Could have been any junior college that's here. Or you going to the military. I'ma save your life, yo. As your dad, I know what's out here. So I'ma save your life. I'ma get you away from this shit. Instead of my son talking to me, he writes me a letter and disappears at my house at 1, 2 o'clock this morning. I wake up, see the letter, immediately call him. Son, what the fuck is you doing? Why you leave? Man, Dad, you know, you gave me an ultimatum to either go to a junior college or go to the military, or I can go live with my mom. And I said, yeah. I chose to go live with my mom. I said, why? I want to follow my own path. I said, that's not following your path. That's not following the path, son. You finna start all over in the beginning, and now what? You ain't gonna have that same motivation that I'm giving you to get up and handle business. So I'm just on here talking to y'all because I'm heartbroken, because I can't believe my young man not understanding what I'm trying to give him. And the fact that he did call his biological mom and she told him to come to her house further lets me understand that nobody's understanding what these young men need but us men. But nobody's hearing us. Nobody's hearing us. As soon as one of our babies get hurt, we on front line. It's crazy. I wish somebody talked to him and tell him the truth.
So the Lord spoke to me, and it said in Proverbs, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we as dads have to invest in the training.
Yes.
And have faith and confidence that the training we've poured in, the biblical training that we've poured in as being counseled by the Father, will pay its dividends in the end. Will they have a rough road? Will there be challenges? Yes, that comes along with growth. But if you prepared them by training them in the way that they should go, then they know what to rely on. Welcome everybody to another segment of the Bold Lounge. I'm Ray Ramos. Before we jump into today's topics, please hit the like and subscribe button as we will continue to bring you more motivational and inspirational content, but also real sit down and real talk content as well. So Let's bring in as many followers as possible. Let us know what you think about us. So going into that, now moving into our segment today, let me welcome back Anthony Stewart again to the Bold Lounge. Tony is a good friend of the Bold Lounge, and we had an opportunity to really chop it up and talk about some really inspirational things and just what we think on real world topics. So before we go ahead, I'm going to let Tony introduce himself once again. Tony, take it away.
Well, thank you, Ray. Yeah, so got my start almost in a previous lifetime. Seems like the legislature in the state of Texas, and then went to law school, took a unanticipated turn into asset management, and then now I'm ordained in the CME church, and I try to bring all that experience into the black church and try to share it with other denominations as well. So it's still asset management, and I still have private clients as well. So, it just seems to be the world that I'm in. So I'll take it and run with it.
Amen, amen. Need more brothers like you. Getting right into it today, what we're going to be discussing today is a video that was shown in regards to a dad really feeling hurt. He's raising two sons, I believe. One is 18, going to be 19 years old. He has college aspirations, but he's going about it the wrong way. He's trying to kind of teetering both sides of the fence, so to speak. He wants to go to college, but on the same token, he also wants to be in the streets. And so the dad is lamenting at the fact that his son is not making wise choices. He talks about going to college, but he's not preparing himself for college. His father is pouring into him what he's learned as a man, and his son is choosing to gravitate to hanging out late at night and not putting his focus in. So the father ultimately gives him an ultimatum. Those of us that have been parents before, we know what that is. Our kids take us here, and we like, you either get it together or you're going to have to figure some things out for yourself. And so he gives his son an ultimatum. And he says that if you said that you wanted to go to a particular college, you got accepted, but you're not doing the work. So maybe you might want to go the junior college route, but you can't be hanging out till 4 o'clock in the morning and thinking that that's going to happen. So here's the ultimatum. You either go to a junior college or I put you in the military. He wakes up to not a conversation, but a letter that his son leaves him. And he looks at the letter, he reads the letter, and immediately he calls his son and says, son, what's going on? And his son says, well, Dad, you made me an ultimatum, and I've now chosen to go live with my mom. So now here he is. His father's hurt. He's in his feelings. He really feels strongly, and I feel strongly as well, that a young man needs to be raised by his father. He needs to have his father's input to show him how life works. A mom is going to love him and nurture him, but she can't teach him what he wants to teach him, which is responsibility and to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. And so now the young man is living at home with his mother. And so here we are left on the Bold Lounge to discuss from a man's perspective what we feel about that. And Tony, you got a chance to look at that video and kind of analyze it. And I really like to get your thoughts on what impressions he put upon you when you saw it.
I like to think that I got a balanced approach on things, but the truth is that there's a large part of me, about a good 85 to 90% that agrees with him. I've heard even my own grandmother say that. I remember before she passed, she said, let's face it, a woman can't raise a man. And so my father used to always say that, and he would, my parents, I grew up in a 2-parent loving household, still together, still loving on each other and taking care of each other, but some of their biggest arguments were over him having that authority. And so I think a lot of times fathers fight for that authority, even in a household that's together. So that it's still the same struggle, whether you're divorced or together, or just separate or together. It never fully remedies itself. And that's largely because there are a different set of standards and expectations of a man. We're never going to get fully around that. What I find interesting is that most mothers, when they're raising their sons, you ask them what it was about their fathers that attracted them. And when they list out that criteria, he was manly. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I knew that he'd protect me, and I knew that he would provide, and I knew this and that and the other. And then you look at the way they're raising their sons, and you say, but that's not the way you're raising your son. Why does it seem to be so different as to what you expect from the man you go home to the man that you're trying to help raise? And so it goes back to that nurturing principle I think you talked about, Ray. And I'll never understand, because I'm a man, it's not that you don't love your kids or anything like that, but I find it interesting that a son can grow up to be a serial killer, a mass murdering, genocidal serial killer. It just anything that, and guess what that mother's gonna say? That's my baby. Make sure he gets a safe prison cell to be in. No, you got a funky grown man, cold-blooded murderer on your hands, and you still worried about your quote baby. And that's the problem, is that once they get locked into that nurturing mode, that oxytocin kicks in from day one as it's supposed to, then they can't get over the growth in their own sons into being a man, and so they miss that gap, and so men recognize it. I think also too, for most men, we are nurturing and protecting two of our kids, but we want to protect them from the big things. Yes. What that father is really saying is that the streets are going to kill him, and so it will either be the police or another brother on the streets. They're going to kill you, and you do have to make a choice. Mm-hmm. You got to make a choice. And so even under lesser circumstances, my own wife and her twin sister, they were card hawks in high school. And so they weren't even in the streets as per se, just playing cards innocently enough. And the summer before college, they were like, all right, nothing is expected of us until we get to college. Let's just play cards. And they were coming home 2, 3 in the morning. And Dr. Eccles, my father-in-law, sat them down and said, if it's 3 in the morning, just keep driving. Don't even pull up in the driveway. He told it to his grown daughters. So there's always going to be that difference between the two genders as to how they handle these things, because what they're saying is fathers want to protect from the big things. Female concerns are typically going to be the smaller thing. Oh, my baby this, my baby's that, oh, have you eaten, have you this, that, the other, and then they can't even think for themselves later on in life. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, but I will also say this too, that unfortunately, because a lot of dads are concerned with authority, they also don't keep up with the jobs situation in its modernity, in its modern setting, and the new opportunities. And so they have a tendency to look through horse blinders, A, B, C, and that's it.
Preach.
And she was a strict Christian who didn't believe in pornography. Yet she went and got a check for him, and they started Playboy in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the difference between the two, moms are still got that 10% right, and it's a high 10% later on in life. Dads tend to weed themselves out with this sternness that's not necessary all the time either. But you can't blame them for what they're working for, and that is to protect. In this case, he wants his son to get off of the streets. And a lot of times, junior college is more serious than regular college, because you got working adults who have life and responsibilities. So that son goes and sees how these mothers have to find accommodations for their kids while they go to class, and the mistakes that they've made that they're trying to remedy. Yeah, that'll raise you rather quickly than to go to big state school where everybody's spoiled, middle class, and got mom and dad's credit card to fuel their drunken frat parties.
But I also think, too, that being a father is a never-ending lesson. We are still learning and evolving as dads. And fathers need to understand that it's, you have to invest in, like you said, knowing what the new kids are thinking, what they're into. We live in a world where we don't teach logic. We teach feelings and emotions. And so, I heard if we taught on the side of logic, the world would be a lot better than it is now. But because we deal in feelings and emotions, those things come and go. They're ebbs and flows, and we have to stay up to date on what's going on. We know that the data tells us that when a father is absent, when he's not a part of the home, it leads to incarceration. It leads to a decrease in educational opportunity. It deals in runaway. It deals in all type of negative aspects when the dad is not in the equation. And it's not just for males, it's also for the young ladies, because they look to the father as the nurturer, as the strength of the family, the glue that holds everything together, that's going to have their back. The part where you talked about investing, I just saw a podcast, my wife and I, the other day, and we said, you know what, we have to sit with our grown children now and talk about this. There's a family that every month, they want to invest $200 each person. And at the end of the year, they talk about who in the family they're going to invest in. So at the end of the year, if there's someone that wanted to start a business, well, there's a little nest egg to get them started. I saw Elon Musk. Elon Musk says $500 a month, he'll charge his kids for rent. But when they turn 18, the money that he's taken for rent, he'll give back to them to invest in their first home. These are the things that kind of are included in what fatherhood is like. I did not come from a two-parent household. My dad was always in my life. He loved me to death, but he and my mother were never together. And so that left me with an identity crisis, because my mother, the nurturer, and because they were co-parenting, my mother had more influence. I was raised in a predominantly female household, and so I was in search of, who am I? What does a man look like? Is a man passive aggressive? Is a man someone that nurtures his family, takes responsibility? These are the questions that I had coming up, and I never wanted to be that type of parent for my children. Unfortunately, that happened. I raised 3 girls, and I have 1 stepson. And so raising girls is a whole lot different. And co-parenting is an issue when the 2 parents are not on the same page. So if I'm trying to impart strength and responsibility into my daughters, the mother had to be in alignment with that. Now, my last daughter was different. My wife and I were married, and she got a different upbringing as opposed to her sisters. And I remember watching the video, and I use it in my mentoring programs. And I think that's what kind of led me to mentoring young men, because I never wanted young men to feel the emptiness and incompleteness, if that's a word, of what manhood really is. People tell man up, do this, but they don't understand what that means. What does man up mean? And so that galvanized me to help young men navigate, help them evolve, and understand that you may be missing a biological, but there will always be father figures in your life, hopefully, that will pour into you and help you. Don't discard that. Use that as a tool. I had uncles that would do the most that they could to help me, but I'll get to it too. But I had to go to the military. Military is where I really learned how to man up, because now I was placed in an environment where it was either crap or get off the pot. Nobody was going to hold my hand. Nobody was going to go kumbaya and nurture me. You either scale the wall, crawl under that barbed wire, or you go back and you try it again. If you fall, you try it again. You get cut, you try it again. And so I had to learn that way. And in this video, I could resonate with the father, but I can also see and want to delve into, what was the relationship leading up to that. And I used to share a video with all of my parents when I would start the mentoring program. And they would always say, why are you showing this video about elephants in the African Serengeti? And in the video, they had these elephants that were acting out of character. These young male elephants.
I know the exact documentary you're talking. Me and my father have talked about it.
Yes.
The bull elephant showed up and showed the younger elephants how to behave.
Exactly.
They stopped trampling the territory, and yes.
Exactly. And that's what quells, even today, when a strong man is in the equation, the streets will not create this distorted version of family that these young men see and want to gravitate to that. So the importance of a father, I have, family members who have young men that the fathers are not involved, but it now leads the kids to be a part of the street. They don't want to, but they're looking at the very security and nurturing and the things that they need that they're not getting from their dad. Somehow the distorted version of it, they're getting it from the street. Yeah. So in this case, I could lament with him, but I also want to know more. Because if you're pouring into your sons, like you said, and I applaud him for being that dad that's concerned for his sons. But if we don't learn to communicate with our children effectively, I see that as a gap. When a kid cannot come to his dad and have that conversation, say, Dad, look, I know you're trying to get me right. I don't like the way the approach. The military is not for me. When he don't feel like they can communicate, they're going to go to the path of least resistance.
Yeah, he wrote his dad a letter, which means he wanted his dad to listen to him. Because if he'd have talked to him about it, he would have gotten interrupted. Something he felt he had to get it out and make his dad sit and read this to get his points across. Yes. You know, yeah, there's definitely something. That's what struck me, was that he wrote him something. That means you want to get it all out, at least just to be fully heard without interruption and a full debate. Maybe that could come later after you've heard everything I've got to say in the letter. And what I find funny is that even for those of us who had dads in the home, then there's a different set of questions we have. And that is, we still have an identity crisis because I can't be dad, you know, or, I can't be as great as dad, or I don't think scientifically like my father. I think philosophically. It's not that he doesn't think philosophically, but I think also politically and transactionally. So, so I've had to I still had to find my own path. And just because you got a good dad in the home doesn't mean that you won't still have to find other people to pour into you in terms of mentorship, because your path is going to be different. So I think to this joke, Ray, about the Jewish father. I went to his rabbi and he said, Rabbi, I raised my son in the faith. I paid dearly for his education, and lo and behold, he goes and marries a Goyim Christian. And then the rabbi says, it's kind of funny. I did the same thing too. I invested heavily in the education. I brought him up in the faith and Shabbat school and everything. And then he went and became a Christian. And then I prayed to God. And then the father said, well, Rabbi, what did God say? God said, I too had a son. No matter what we do as fathers, the son's going to go on to do what they got to do as well. And so we have to kind of think about, is this an actual path? What's going on with this path, even though it doesn't look like what we think they ought to do? And then if it still looks precarious and unsafe, yeah. Because like I said, I don't think the dad is all wrong. You are going to have to choose. You cannot. The worst kind of student in college were the ones who try to keep a foot in the streets and then one in the classroom. You're going to have to choose. Those brothers on the street do not have the same obligations you have. Sometimes they got worse ones, because they got life and death on their hands eventually.
Yeah, and what came to mind when I was, pondering over the video and I kept replaying it or whatever, the Lord spoke to me, and it said in Proverbs, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we as dads have to invest in the training,
yes,
and have faith and confidence that the training we've poured in, the biblical training that we've poured in as being counseled by the Father, will pay its dividends in the end. Will they have a rough road? Will there be challenges? Yes, that comes along with growth. But if you prepare them by training them in the way that they should go, then they know what to rely on. The best thing that I have as being a father, as I said, my stepson, I've been in his life since he was 6 years old. He is now 30 years old. He has his doctorate in physical therapy. He has his own business. But I came in and I never treated him like he was my stepson. I treated him like he was my son. I helped him to understand that he had a relationship with his father and that his father is an integral part of his life. I always made that evident. I was never the guy that came in and said, your dad is this or your dad's not doing that. No, it was the opposite. And I remember when my son started his business, his dad was at the grand opening, and his dad walked over to me and he said, yo, man, thank you for helping to raise my son, helping him to go to college, play football, do these things. I said, let me tell you something, brother. It was my pleasure, because we as men have to support one another, not tear each other down, to build up. So it was my pleasure to do this for your son. And even when my wife and I used to talk, the kids used to be kicking and screaming. They didn't want to go to the youth church and whatever. we still instill that in them. That's when train up a child in the way that they should go. When my son started doing his urban clothing and all the stuff like that, I had a chance to look inside one of his hats, inside the collars to the shirt. Now, it may look urban on the outside, but on the inside, he's writing biblical scripture. So I'm like, so they listen, they take it in, and they apply it. And that gives you great joy knowing that, you know what, they went kicking and screaming. My daughters, they talk about, I'm going to pay because I got a big job or I got a big paper that I have to do in school. So these are the things that affirm to you that as a father, if you continually get better at it, you continually want the communication. My wife is always telling me, talk to them, ask them questions, because if you don't ask them the questions, they're never going to tell you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, that'll preach right there. That'll preach. I think for fathers, dads are okay with trial and error. I think that's a large difference. What we're concerned about is life or death. Yes. He wants his son to not be exposed to the streets and stay away from life and death. But everything else in between, the fact that the military is safer in his mind than the streets, that tells you something that's going on instinctively. That the front lines are safer than our streets. We got warfare on the streets that's deadlier than the warfare abroad. And so when I think about what he's saying with that, that's a major implication about the world, about our context here in North America and how we live in America. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was always that approach of trial and error on the smaller things is okay, whereas with most mothers it's not. I see these kids in my neighborhood now, they got all this gear on just to get on a bicycle. I didn't wear half of that stuff when I got on a bicycle. And I'm going to come back with some bruises, some scrapes, might be just shorter than necessary for stitches. I mean, technically, this should have been stitched, but it wasn't. So there it is. And so for dads, it's like, no. It's not going to kill them, then it's going to teach them something. And so
I'm going to say something about women, and women need to understand this. And my wife is great at it, but women need to understand that men are more than just a paycheck.
Yeah. Yes.
That the man is not just supposed to be
sperm donor with a paycheck.
A sperm donor. In co-parenting, the mother has to understand that even if the two of you don't agree on your personal lives, the investment that you make in a child that the both of you decided to bring into this world has to be first and foremost. What I applaud most about my wife, and I'll have her on the podcast, is, sometimes my kids will be going through it. And she'll tell them, you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. And she says it'll make them better because they'll have to learn how to problem solve, right? She'll listen to them and she'll console them to a certain point. But she said, you know what? You guys are going to have to learn to stand on your own too. If you're struggling, you may struggle for a little while. We're here as your parents, but we're not here to hold you and hold your hand and make it all right, because if we continue to do that, then you're never going to do it on your own. You're always going to be looking to us to do it for you. And we've understood that co-parenting aspect has to be, and women have to understand their role and have to understand the role of the father. And I know he pointed up to something, and he talked about in the Islamic culture, where once a young man turns 7 years old, the mother no longer has any input in the life of that male child. Now, how do you feel about that?
This is probably a little too far. That would explain the extremes of Wahhabism that I do consider to be extremes. There's one other society that was like that, and that was Sparta. Sparta took kids at age 5 or 6 and started putting their sons into military duty. But there's a difference between Sparta and Athens. Now, both are Greek speaking, but one has actually got slavery in that Sparta. So they had to be militaristic. And they had to do that. So when you see a situation where societies separate young men at such an early age and then start limiting their contact with feminine essence, that's not healthy either. And it should be a hint in the tip-off that you're dealing with an oppressive social structure. It's probably gone too far the other way.
Yeah. So this has been a great conversation. I see this kind of branching off into different kind of platforms, but it's an all-important one because our communities of color are suffering because of the lack of fatherhood, the lack of cohesiveness, the lack of co-parenting our young people, and we're allowing other people to help them figure it out. And if they can't learn it from us, what makes you think that the street, that other resources are going to teach them what you should be teaching them? So let's get it together, dads. Let's start to really delve in and study and get stronger at what fatherhood is. And if we are to be Christ-like, we are to follow the Father. He has the blueprint. So we have to go to him first for the wise counsel that he will give us, because the assignment, the covenant that he has given us to be fathers, we can only implicate what we know. And if we don't know, then what can we give our young people? So this has been a great segment. Tony, once again, thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Delving into more topics, man. May God continue to cover you and bless you. Listeners, let's continue to be a part of this movement called the Bold Lounge, and the best is yet to come.
Bless you, my brother. Bless you.